Hello, everyone. If you are able to turn your cameras on, we'd love to see you. If you can't turn your cameras on, we completely understand. Welcome, everyone. This is the second session of Reimagine's three-part series, Cultivating Caregiving, which we are presenting in conjunction with the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving. My name is Andrew Engel, and I lead virtual public programs at Reimagine. I live in New York City, also known as Lenapehoking, the land of the Lenni Lenape peoples, past, present, and future. During the colonial era and the early federal period, the US removed indigenous communities, but some also remained among the continuing tribal communities of this region. I acknowledge the indigenous territory where I am to remind myself that more steps are needed to undo generations of damage caused by colonialism and white supremacy. Please let us know where all of you are zooming in. We're very curious. Also, I want to mention that for those who may have difficulty seeing, I am a white cisgender male with glasses. I've got salt and pepper gray hair. I'm wearing a white cream collared shirt, and behind me is a bright orange wall. Today, my colleague Nicole Tan is providing assistance with this gathering. Thank you so much, Nicole. I want to tell you a bit about Reimagine first. Reimagine is a nonprofit organization catalyzing a uniquely powerful community, people of different backgrounds, different ages, different races and faiths, people of no faith, all coming together to heal ourselves, our communities, and the world. We support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality in order to transform life's biggest challenges into meaningful action and growth. Reimagine resources, support groups, events like this one today are free and accessible to the public. This is made possible by the support and generosity of participants like you. So for those who already made a tax-deductible donation when you registered for today's program, thank you so much. Your gift will immediately support Reimagine's mission to help people of all walks of life transform the hard parts into purpose and action. And another organization worthy of your support, of course, is the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers. Nicole will also paste some information about RCI, and I'm going to now move on to tell you a bit more about this series. We've been exploring topics over a month-long period here at Reimagine. These themes examine different aspects of loss, grief, and struggle through the lens of something called post-traumatic growth, which is a body of psychological research suggesting that we have the potential to transform and deepen as human beings after we experience trauma and emotional wounds. Caregiving, arguably, is more grief than growth. And we don't want to minimize the struggle that many of you are facing as family caregivers. We just want to suggest that through this experience, there might be some learning, some kind of transformation. Last week at our kickoff panel discussion for this series, Reverend Cynthia Carter-Perilliet shared her experience of taking care of her father when he began hospice. She said the experience of caregiving deepened her relationship to the divine. For her, the divine is God, and that might be something completely different for some of you. The person that you're caring for, their spiritual health is as important as their physical and mental health. And Reverend Cynthia learned to treat her dad as a holy person and as a whole person. And that's how her organization trains other caregivers, her care navigators. What will you learn about the person in your care? What will you learn about yourself? And if you have the means to afford someone to give you some respite, perhaps that aide might learn something new about your person who may have a different cultural background. So that's just a little nugget of wisdom from Reverend Cynthia and that discussion. I encourage you to check it out. We have the recording available for you. Nicole will paste that link in the chat. And please register for next week's session, which is Let's Take Action. And that is featuring Richard Louie, who some of you may know in the caregiving space as one of the most prominent spokespeople. He's an author, an MSNBC journalist, and filmmaker. Before we begin, I just want to mention a few Zoom tips. For those who wish, you can click on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen to get a live transcript of what's being said. And you can save the chat, and please use that chat, by clicking on the three dots within the chat window. And feel free to send me or Nicole a private note in the chat if you're having any difficulty. We might be able to help you. We are recording this program, and everyone who has registered for it will receive a follow-up email with the recording and resources from our speakers. Okay. I want to say a few words about our workshop leader today, who you will meet shortly. Jessica C. Guthrie is a visionary leader dedicated to reimagining how we care. As a caregiver for her mother living with Alzheimer's, Jessica has observed the challenges faced by families, particularly those caring for individuals with dementia. Through her platform, Career and Caregiving Collide, Jessica shares her insights, her pioneering ideas, and guides others in navigating the intersection of their professional careers and caregiving responsibilities. Her mission is to amplify diverse caregiving narratives and ensure that caregivers feel fully supported. Jessica brings over 13 years of experience in the education and nonprofit management and leadership fields. She is now using her experiences to drive her own entrepreneurial efforts to create a better, more equipped world for caregivers and their loved ones. Jessica, it's been a joy planning this with you. We're going to hear from you soon. But now I want to say a few words about our other special guest, Dr. Toni P. Miles. Dr. Toni P. Miles is a Rosalind Carter Institute Visiting Scholar who serves as an adjunct professor in the Department of Community Health and Preventative Medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine. Dr. Miles brings a wealth of expertise in the fields of caregiving, geriatrics, chronic diseases, health disparities, and bereavement. Dr. Miles is a physician. She's an epidemiologist. She's a teacher. She is many, many, many things. And her expertise has been recognized with fellow status in both the Gerontological Society of America and the American Association of Public Health. And since 2010, she has focused on the health effects of bereavement. In 2020, she completed the first ever statewide survey of new bereavement in Georgia, in partnership with the Georgia Department of Public Health and the Retirement Research Foundation. And based on these data, Georgia is now poised to lead the nation in policies to reduce the negative impacts of grief and loss. Dr. Toni, it's also been a joy getting to know you. I forgot to mention that Dr. Toni also is a huge movie buff, and in our planning meetings, she's been giving us lots of tips. So we may get some good caregiver-themed movie recommendations ultimately out of this session as well. So Dr. Toni, I want to kick it off to you, and I want to do that first by quoting the famous First Lady that RCI it really leans into this quote, and I love it. Rosalind Carter said, "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And as a way of a brief introduction, and which will be followed by some of your remarks, who are you, Toni, among the four kinds? And for folks in the audience, I encourage you to also tell us in the chat who you are.
Wow, Andy, I don't know. They say never follow a better band when you're performing. Andy is the better band. Boom. Anyway, thank you for having me. I am really excited to be here. I've been watching the yak on LinkedIn about this work. Thank you all very much. So all of you who are, it says there are 42 participants out there. So for those of you who I cannot see, that's okay. But I would love to see your faces. Wow, I have 5 minutes, and so I'm just gonna prime the pump for this conversation. So he asked me, where am I in that caregiver matrix? I am a current caregiver. I have two very elderly parents who live on a farm in the northwest corner of Missouri near the Iowa border. Yes, Black people live on farms near Iowa. Okay, born and bred in Kansas, that's me. I've been cared for, kind of went through an illness thing myself and was cared for by my husband, who we've been together for 50 some odd years. Same man, 50 years. Oh my God. So I 2 out of the 4, I can, definitely say that I've been a part of. And what I am really, in my role as a physician, I started to become interested in the health effects of loss and bereavement. I call it bereavement. Grief is how you feel about it. And some people are relieved, there's sadness, but you're happy that that person is no longer suffering. Bereavement is the fact of the loss. And I am starting, I see Gigi's comment in the chat box. Thank you for that. What I'm understanding is that no matter how you feel about someone, the process of them dying can injure our health in ways that we're not quite aware of. So one of the things, when I started pursuing this as a real research person, first of all, you should know, I was in medical training when HIV hit the hospitals back in the 80s. That was trauma. I was PTSD for a while when I saw COVID come back. I felt really sorry for the physicians in training because it's a hard thing to see. But you can, with the right frame of mind and support, you can get through it. So that's how I got started on this topic. People ask me, oh, this is a terrible topic. Why do you do it? It makes me happy to help people. Pursue your interests, be happy. So here's a couple of pearls. I've spent lots and lots of time interviewing people who have experienced a loss. And usually it's that moment right when it happens, that lead up to it, and then the period afterwards where most of the injury starts. So if we can do something in that moment, we can at least deflect the amount of injury. Because if you really cared about that person, you wouldn't forget about them. They come back to you. Sometimes, dates, things that trigger it. So first of all, what I've been told to share with the rest of you by people I've talked to, you are not alone. You're not the only one. And so it's not a bad thing to reach out to others when you really need it. You're not a burden. We have ears. You have ears under all this hair. And they're open. I will listen to I see Debbie's laughing at me. Good. That's what I want to see, laughter. One strategy that helps a lot that I've heard over and over again, I got 50 seconds, is walking. You can walk, and we're not talking about marathons, we're just talking about a stroll. You can walk with a companion. You can walk alone. If you have a dog, you can walk the dog. No dialogue is required. It's the movement that helps. And the third thing that I'm just going to pass along because I got 30 seconds is that do not rush this process. It will take the time that it takes. Because what happens is the grief doesn't get smaller, you grow around it. That's how that happens. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the audience and from Jessica, because to my mind, caregiving is one of those things that lands. Um, that was my phone. I'm timing myself. Um, it, it ends one way with one of you, either the care recipient or the caregiver ends. If you want to see a movie recommendation, look at American Fiction. It's a caregiver story, and the caregiver dies before the care recipient does. And that creates the movie interest. So with that, I'm going to stop because Andy's like, yes, let's let Jessica into the conversation. How's that?
That was great, Dr. Toni. Thank you so much. And now I am passing this to our workshop leader, Jessica C. Guthrie.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some names, and so I'm so excited to be here with you all today. Let me just get my screen shared and we will jump right in. Do you see a PowerPoint slide? Yes, I believe you do. Thank you. Okay, well, this is the second in the series of 3 different sessions. Let's experience, so you're a caregiver, now what? I just want to preface and say whether you are a current caregiver, you're a former caregiver, you're not a caregiver yet, but will be, I hope that you take something out of today's session that you can either apply or tuck away for when the time is needed. And or just reflect on the time that you did have as a caregiver. And so let's just jump right in. I am Jessica C. Guthrie, and I'm excited to be here with you. So I do want to say I have about 45-ish minutes, and we won't be able to touch on everything, or I won't be able to share all the things about me. But if you would like to stay in touch, please follow me on Instagram at Career Caregiving Collide, or shoot me an email at hello@jessicacguthrie.com. I would love to stay in touch. And now that we've been a part of this workshop together, I am always in your corner. So you now have someone who is in your care squad along the way. Some quick housekeeping. I like to tell people engage in the best way that works for you. We will be virtual and using slides on the screen to follow along with some reflection questions. And we will also be using a Slido for like anonymous polling. I will also say if you do not have a notebook or a piece of paper, go ahead and grab that for your own just thoughts throughout today's time. What I'll also say is feel free to use the chat. Like I love to, process out loud. So if something resonates, like feel free to say it. Feel free to share your perspective, your story in the chat, whatever works for you. We are now part of this collective community today. So let's share with each other. The last thing, which you all can either use your cell phones for or another tab on your computer, we are going to use Slido. So go to slido.com. And when you go to that site, it'll ask you for a code. You're going to enter code 219117. If you're someone who's like driving and listening, don't do Slido. Okay, I'll just read the things out loud. But if you are stationary, please go to slido.com, enter code 2191171. And if you go there now, there should actually be a question that pops up that actually asks you who's in the room. And so choose the one, you can choose more than one, but choose the description that matches who you are in terms of caregiving at this current moment. Good. Let's see. Let me go over to the Slido screen. We've got 2 participants in it so far. Okay, lots of parent caregivers, non-family members. You can also read this as cared for. So if your journey is over in current caring, you can also say past tense if it's not a present tense for you. I've got about 9 people. If you've just joined, go to slido.com or use the QR code on your phone and then enter the code 219-1171. I'll wait for a few more people. It looks like we've got a lot of caregivers of their parents in this space today. I was once a teacher, so my minutes are teacher minutes, and so I'll give us 30 more seconds. Okay. So about half of the folks on today's call are caregivers of their parents, or were once caregivers of their parents, followed very closely by caring for non-family members. And we've got folks who are also caring for a family member of sorts, right? A spouse or a partner. And then we've got some folks who aren't caregivers yet, but are in this space. I like to do this to see who's here. So thank you for engaging. The next question, stay on your Slido, is this. How would you describe your caregiver circumstance? Are you a solo caregiver living with your loved one? Are you long distance? Do you split the responsibilities with other people? Are you a sandwich caregiver, caring for kids and the person you're caring for? Does your person live in a facility? You are still absolutely a caregiver, but tell us, what's your circumstance? Who's in the room today? I am a part of the solo caregiver crew. Okay. So it seems like we've got a mix of folks who are solo caregiving in this space today, sharing responsibilities with others, whatever that looks like for you. We've got some long distance caregivers. I was once a long distance caregiver, so I see you. Some folks who were also sandwich caregivers. I definitely see you. Those of you who are not caregivers yet. Okay. Thank you for participating. My last question for this current moment is this. I want for you, for those of you who are current caregivers or were caregivers, to go back to the start of your caregiving journey. What word describes your feelings in that moment in time? So go back for yourself. That could be years, that could be a couple of months or weeks, depending on your story. Go back to that feeling. What was the word that described your feelings in that moment in time? Afraid, ignorant, it begins, helplessness, enthusiastic, unsure, intense. Fear keeps coming up. That's why it's the biggest on the screen. Overwhelmed, not prepared, grateful, anxious, yep. So the word cloud represents as if the words get bigger, that means multiple of you have put that word in, right? Which means that's a common trend or connection across the folks in this space today. Scared, unprepared, overwhelmed, fear, anxious. Hopeful. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Humbled, uneducated. Absolutely. Wow. I remember all of these feelings. I still have these feelings at times. I wanted us to start here because I think so often it's really easy for us to think that no one understands, no one gets us, no one knows this feeling. And clearly, by what's popping up on this Slido and this word cloud right now, is that so many of us felt this sense of fear, being scared, unprepared, anxious, overwhelmed, right? And that in this, right, we also have the opportunity to learn from each other, to grow together, and to overcome these things, not just in this workshop, but just along our journey of caregiving. And so I just want to say thank you for your vulnerability and sharing pieces of your journey with me, and kicking us off together in this way. So let's go back to my screen and get started. So I first want to say thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your stories, but also thank you for being here today. Whether you are a caregiver, a soon-to-be caregiver, whether you have been on this journey for years and you're just starting out, to those of you who have been holding on to your experience in silence, to those of you who feel seen, those of you who feel unseen, to the caregivers who have sacrificed for your loved ones emotionally, financially, spiritually, to the caregivers holding both joy and grief, to the caregivers overwhelmed and just pushing through because that's what we're told to do, to the caregivers who said yes to being in community today. I see you. I hear you. Thank you for the ways in which you show up for your family. Thank you for all the ways in which you show up for you. You are appreciated. You are loved. You are valued. I think we take for granted sometimes when caregivers show up. And as a caregiver myself, I do not take for granted the time that you're here today. So thank you for being in community, but also thank you for caring for your person. If they haven't told you today, you truly are valued and appreciated. So who am I, this person talking to you? I am Jessica C. Guthrie. I am the daughter of Constance Mason Guthrie. I was her 39-year-old surprise. She thought she had the flu, but I was her 9-month flu. The best thing that could ever happen to her. My mother is the epitome of joy and creativity and being bold. She was an entrepreneur. She owned a hair salon for 18 years. She was traveling the world for hair shows and conferences, doing her thing. My mom is someone who is so deeply selfless and wants to make sure that she was pouring into everyone around her for them to be their best selves. My mom was an educator. She worked in special education in middle school. She gave up her career as a hair salon owner to raise me in suburban Virginia to ensure that I had the best education, the best access to opportunity, to ensure that I grew up to be the best leader and person possible. To understand my journey, you have to understand pieces of my mom. And so this is Constance Guthrie. The fall of 2014, my mother was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. My mother was an educator in the local school system. I am an only child. I was 26 years old, living in Dallas, Texas at the time. My mother was 66 when she was diagnosed. At that time, fall 2014, I became the long distance caregiver of my mom. At the time, my mom was still fairly independent, still working and living on her own. I believed at the time, and this might resonate with some of you, that in 2014, it was my job to protect my mother's dignity. I still believe that in 2024. My mother was still working. She was still engaging with other people. And so the headline of how I very much protected her was, oh, my mom is fine. She's okay, right? My mother was losing weight, but we were buying new clothes to make sure that she still looked good, right? My mother was losing weight, so I was prepping 40 and 50 meals to make sure she was eating when I wasn't home. I was getting up at 4:30 a.m. Central Time in Texas to call my mom to make sure she was prepped and ready to go for school, to make sure she remembered the basic things so she could still show up really well. Eventually, that didn't last as very long. And it got to the point where she needed to leave her job. And so I put my mother on FMLA fall of 2016. And she was able to leave and be on leave and still receive a full paycheck, until the end of that school year when she officially retired. To give you a bigger picture of the headline, between 2014 and 2017, my mom was still very much working and trying to show up as best as she could. In 2016, I put her on FMLA. She officially retired because I didn't tell folks that she was on FMLA because of Alzheimer's disease, but she officially retired in 2017. Throughout this time, Jessica, was actually living in Dallas, Texas. My mom was in Virginia. I was very much at the beginning of my career doing my thing, but I was now traveling back and forth between Texas and Virginia every few weeks to check in, doctor's appointments, prep meals, to find things she had hidden, right? To make sure that she had enough activities to engage in. March 2019, I could no longer care for my mom by leveraging Ring cameras and doorbell cameras. My mother was beginning to wander. She was beginning to bolt out the door across the street to her neighbor's house. I could no longer just rely on companion care. And so I put all my stuff in storage in Dallas, Texas, and moved back home to my childhood bedroom to be present and proximate to my mom. At the time, this was pre-pandemic, so it was a huge deal to ask to be able to work from home. But I would say my job basically supported me in being able to show up for my mom and be able to show up for my job by allowing me to be like one of the first virtual or work from home employees. Little did we know in 2020, we would all be work from home employees. And then May 16th, coming up tomorrow, 2-year anniversary, 2022, my mother had declined significantly. By this time, my mother's walking gait had changed. Her overall ability to engage in conversation had diminished. My mother was no longer ambulatory. She was no longer able to get herself up. She was no longer able to feed herself. She had lost a significant amount of weight. We've been in the hospital 4 different times. And because of this decline, May 16th, 2022, I put my mom onto home hospice. But the story matters because that was May 16th, 2022. Today, May 15th, 2024, my mother is still living. She is 75 years old and thriving with late-stage Alzheimer's disease. While being 7D on the fast scale, she's fully bedbound, no longer ambulatory, fully incontinent, fully dependent on me for every sip of water, every spoon of food. I am literally her lifeline. But I can tell you, as some of you said in this initial word cloud, it has been 10 years as her primary caregiver, and I am still very grateful. I am grateful to be her caregiver. I am grateful to be her daughter. I am grateful that she is still here with me. So that's a piece of my story. And even though I say that after 10 years, I am filled with gratitude, I still feel exhausted, lonely, this sense of heaviness, on high alert, right? Like what is going to go wrong today or what's going to crumble today? I wonder who Jessica could have been or would have been if this wasn't the thing that popped up in my life. There are often many days I feel unseen. You might be feeling some of these things too. And the thing that I'll say is that in this season of caregiving, it often feels like caregiving is happening to me. It's happening to us, right? There's so many things out of our control. Yet, what I can say after 10 years on this journey, in the sorrow of navigating and supporting our loved ones, there is absolutely opportunity for growth. There is absolutely space for hope and joy and connection. And that's what I hope that we tap into today. So it's a workshop. This means you all have to do a little bit of work. We're going to engage in a visualization exercise and some reflection. We use this all the time in coaching. It's the practice of essentially like imagining what you would want to achieve in your future, as if it were true today. It involves thinking about all the senses. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you touch? And this allows you to get more aware of the end goal that you have in mind. So whether you are a current caregiver, whether you are sharing responsibilities with folks, whether you are not a caregiver yet, I do believe visualizing what you want to be true for yourself in the future in terms of your caregiving relationship in terms of you as a caregiver is so important to help you start to figure out how do you want to start showing up for yourself today. So with that, take out your journal, your phone, your computer, whatever. And we're going to reflect on 2 specific questions. But before we do that, once you get settled, I want for you to close your eyes, to relax your hands, release the tension in your shoulders, and take a deep breath. Breathe in, hold it, and release. Take another deep breath. And one last one. Okay. My first question for you. I want for you to fast forward for yourself 5 years from now. What do you want to be true about your loved one's experience with you as their caregiver? So what do I want to be true about my loved one's experience with me as their caregiver 5 years from now? What do you want them to say? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to know? 5 years is arbitrary, but give yourself some space between now and the future. Go ahead and write that down. Take one more minute. And feel free to dream here. This doesn't have to be like, it's okay if it's currently not happening, right? Give yourself the space to be expansive. What do I want to be true? Okay, my second question, which kind of builds on the first one. Fast forward 5 years. What would I want to be true about me and my well-being as a caregiver? This is about you because we spend so much time talking about our person. I want for you to take a few moments to think 5 years from now, what do I really want to be true about my well-being as a caregiver? Again, be expansive. Take one more minute here. I should have had some fancy elevator music in the background. I apologize. Didn't think about that. Okay, so we started with the visualization, the fast forwarding, okay? But as we all know, right, we can hope and think about what we want to be true. And there's also some very real things in our reality that are keeping us from truly living into what we want to be true, right? And so I want for you to bring yourself back to this present moment, your current reality, today, May 15th, 2024. And in thinking about your visualizations 5 years from now, the key question is, what is currently in the way of your desired coming to life right now? Or, what needs to be, like, what's in the way of being consistent? You could say things like time, I don't have time, there's not enough time. You could say things like, my I don't have any boundaries. You could say that, my responsibilities are greater than the hours in the day. I don't know, whatever it might be. But be honest with yourself. What is keeping you in this present moment from truly leaning into and living the desired life with your person you're caring for and for yourself right now? If I were doing this exercise, things that I would write for Jessica, things like, I am controlling everything. I'm doing everything. No one really knows what's happening in this journey with my mom. I would say I am burning the candle at both ends and traveling back and forth between Texas and Virginia every 10 days. I, I don't have any systems or routines. And so I feel like every day is a challenge. I would also say, like, I'm not making time to eat well. I would also say, I haven't actually asked for help. I would also say, Jessica's always had it together. Of course, she's figured this out. Those are just my reflections. Maybe that resonates with you. Who knows? I'm just being honest as if I were doing this exercise with you. I wanted to start here because in order for us to make intentional changes, we have to be cognizant and aware of where we want to be and where we currently are, right? So let's go back to the Slido. Let's share, because I can guarantee you there are probably things that we've all said as barriers that are actually common. So go back to the Slido. You should see this question. You can type in, what are the barriers, or what barriers are in the way of your visualizations coming to life with your loved one and for your own well-being? Let's see where there might be some connections, some overlaps, some common experiences. What barriers are in the way of your visualizations coming to life with your loved one and your own well-being? Someone says nothing. That's awesome. Let me share this screen so you can see. Your thoughts: guilt, an unwillingness to jointly plan, visualize an uncertain or painful future. My ego. Yep. Busyness. Adequate resources. Yep. Myself. Resources. The need to breathe, respite, getting away. Your person's ability to connect as a partner. There's a common thread here of resources, not being able to say no, managing your time, community, emotional capacity. Oh my goodness, yes. The infrastructure of our social services, yes. There's entirely too much pressure on individuals without systemic support. I'm sure we can all say a collective amen to that. Communication issues, yeah. What else? The role reversal. My mom wanting me to help care for her while not recognizing I am her adult child. No longer able to hope for relational healing due to cognitive decline, uncertainty. Thank you all. The need to learn more and gain better understanding of the disease going forward. So you all have your own journeys, right? You're all in different places, but acknowledging that there are things in the way of like you truly showing up the way you desire with your loved one, and even thinking about your own well-being in the future. It's important to acknowledge the barriers so that we can like address them as best as we can and or work around them. Some things we can control, some things we can't. But I want to call out some commonalities here of like needing support, needing of resources, right? Feeling alone and isolated, having to navigate, the uncertainty of whatever disease you're navigating. This need for space and rest, right? A sense of fear, right? So, we all have different caregiving journeys, but acknowledging that like, there's so many common threads for our own experiences in this space of what might be holding us back. And so I just want to say thank you again for being vulnerable and sharing what might be in your way. And so let's talk about how we overcome some of these things that are in our way. So in the midst of the things that are potentially holding us back from our visualized futures, how do we get there? What I will say, cultivating joy, growth, and connection is possible. And the first thing I'll share with you is that while we can't control everything, we have to start focusing on what's within our personal locus of control. Now, you might be like, I've heard this before, but I'm going to bring it back up because I think it's important to reground ourselves here in this idea that like the things that we're worried about, the things that frustrate us, the things that are taking up space in our brain, in our emotional capacity, can often fall into 3 different domains. The things that you can control, the things that you can influence, and then there's all the stuff that's outside of our control. Too often, the things that actually consume us live in these like outer circles, the stuff that we actually don't have control or influence over. But what I'm going to say is that when we actually start to zoom in on what we can control, things start to get clearer. You start to cut through the noise. You start to get way more on top of the things that you actually need and want, so that you can support yourself and others can actually show up to support you. And so the first thing that you actually have full control over is your mindset as a caregiver. Your mindset as a caregiver as it comes to showing up for yourself, showing up for your person, showing up for your job, showing up for whomever, right? But like the thing that you have the greatest control over is what you believe about yourself, your own capabilities, and what is possible in your role as a caregiver. And so in order for me, this is like actually what I had to tell myself, Jessica, in order for me to be the best caregiver, the best person to me, the best person in my job, I had to reduce my own limiting beliefs and fears. Like I have to tell myself, I am capable, I am competent, I can navigate this disease, even though I don't know anything about it, right? I am deserving and qualified. I was still working a full-time job. And so I had to say, like, Jessica, just because you're a caregiver does not mean that I'm no longer deserving of promotions and opportunities. I am highly qualified and capable of doing those things. I had to tell myself that, like, things don't have to be the status quo or the way that things have always been done. One of my greatest mindset shifts that I'll also offer all of you is that it is okay for you to speak up and ask for what you need. It is okay, caregiver, to speak up and ask for what you need. And then one of my greatest mindset shifts, particularly as my mother became unable to express and share these things with me, but I had to make sure I said them to myself so I could continue showing up, was that I am loved, I am valued, I am appreciated, even when the person that I'm caring for can no longer tell me that directly. And so I want to encourage you to take a moment to think, okay, what about my own mindset do I need to shift as I'm thinking about my own well-being and how I want to show up with the person that I'm caring for? What might I need to be thinking about and shifting in my own mindset or limiting beliefs in this current moment? Just take a second, write it down. It's for you. You won't have to share this one. Okay. So some considerations as you work towards your visualized future. Some of these things you're like, I already do them. I got it. I just got to do it, right? Okay, cool. Some of you might be like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. Some of you might be saying, I actually just need to sit down and think about this for myself. Wherever you are, my hope is that you can take something from these next few slides. But what I'm going to also share is that this isn't a comprehensive list. There's probably many other things you could be considering. I'm just going to share with you what I know from the last 10 years of my caregiving journey and what has helped me be more grateful, more connected, and live in a space of joy while navigating a devastating disease, right? And so I'm going to give you 3 areas or 3 like buckets to consider. If you're a note taker with, who likes organization, you can make a table with 3 columns, okay? But what to consider when it comes to yourself. Because the first thing that we can control is ourselves. So the thing that I would say for yourself and thinking about your own well-being 5 years from now, the thing that I continue to tell Jessica every day is that I cannot show up for my mom if I'm not here. And so the things that I would consider that I would offer you as you are in your current situation is, are you clear about your priorities of what matters most? And have you scheduled them in? Literally, put it on the calendar. For me, that meant I did not multitask during lunch. I had a lunchtime for Jessica because the first thing that goes as a caregiver is your own eating time, okay? That also meant scheduling in my evening walks with my mom when she could still walk, because that was our connection time. And no meeting, no commitment was more important than those 2 things, which played a huge role in my own well-being. Connected to that is, what am I being disciplined about? If I know that I need the space to be able to clear my head to show up for my person who might be, non-compliant today, doesn't want to listen, I need my quiet time on the porch. Every day I get up and sit on the porch with my tea and listen to the birds, right? But I'm extremely disciplined about blocking off that time for myself. I'm extremely disciplined about my own meal prep because I know that if I don't prep my meals, Jessica will call up Uber Eats and DoorDash and eat French fries in a heartbeat, okay? You might have that, your own version of that, but what are you truly going to be disciplined about to control your time so that you have more space to navigate a system that's unfair and inequitable, right? What brings you joy? What brings you energy? And how is that incorporated every day? You do not have to wait for a moment or an experience to feel joy. Joy and energy can be a part of your daily routine if you commit to planning it in. That could mean your joy could come from watching reality TV. Your joy could come from, getting out to go for a walk, to go for a run. Your joy could come from connecting with a friend that you only talk to, every 6 weeks. Whatever it might be, the point that I'm making here is, what are you committing to and sticking with? The last two are most important. Have you actually scheduled your own doctor's appointments? Your well-being hinges on you taking care of yourself, literally. And the most important thing in terms of your own well-being is, have you given yourself the space to feel and to feel all the feels? For me, as a young millennial, high-achieving person, when I became a caregiver, it was like, hit the ground running. What systems can I create? What are all the things I need to do? Like, I was literally burning the candle at both ends. And so when people ask, like, how did you feel? I didn't give myself to feel the space to feel sad, or, I didn't give myself the space to understand that what I was going through was grief. And I often wonder what would have been different for myself if I had given myself the space to feel all of those things in the earlier years. And so as you're thinking about your own well-being 5 years from now, consider these prompts for yourself. My second set of considerations with your loved one. Those of you who are navigating changes in your spouse and your parent, right? Things are different. You might be harboring onto resentment, fear, frustration, or you might be like trying to do everything because that's in your nature. The thing that I will offer you as you're considering making adjustments for yourself is that no one is asking you to be a martyr. They just need you to keep trying, showing up, and doing your best. And so my first prompt or consideration for you is like, how are you expressing love and appreciation for your person, for who they are right now? Not who they used to be, not who you wish they were, but are you truly seeing your person as the human that is showing up with you in this current moment? What systems or routines might you need to put in place to make things more efficient and to create more time? We don't have any more hours in the day, but the more efficient we are in the things that are most routined gives us the brain space and the emotional capacity to show up in other spaces. And so I often share people, like, I was intense about meal prepping, medication routine, washing routine, eating routine, not because I was a control freak, partially, right? I'm a Taurus, it's natural, right? Like, but I had all of those systems so that I could create the space for me to really focus on the things that needed my attention the most. And for some times that was being on the phone for hours with doctors, offices, navigating systems that I struggled understanding, engaging in conversations with, caregivers, whatever it might be. So thinking about, like, what do you need in place so that you can show up best for your loved one and do the things that are most important for you to be spending your energy on. I think the other thing that's important to name is, like, are we choosing to live in the moment and be present? After the last 10 years, I probably didn't get really present with my mom until the last 2, when I thought she was going to die. I spent so much time trying to do everything that I didn't sit down and slow down and get present with her until I thought it was over. But the thing that I'll tell you is that the moment that I got present and slowed down and sat next to my mom, and truly spent time with her, everything else got easier. And I would say my mom got better, right? Now, I'm not saying your person's gonna get better because you slow down. But what I am saying is, as caregivers, as people who are taking on the responsibility, sometimes for our own well-being and our person's well-being, the best thing that we can do is to get present and to live in the current moment. Because all the other systems and routines that you create, yes, are helpful, but are, not the same as your person feeling loved and valued in that moment. And the last thing I'll offer you is, what are you delegating? Anybody ask you to do everything? What are you delegating and getting off of your plate? My last set of considerations, and I'll stop talking. But as you're thinking about all the barriers you mentioned, What might you need to put in place for other people? The thing I'll offer is that people don't know how to show up for you if you don't tell them. One of my greatest regrets is like I was not clear in communicating with my family, like my current state and stress as my mom's long distance caregiver at the time, her journey, and where I needed them. Like I didn't do that. And that's important for them to be able to show up well, for me to communicate to them. I think the second thing to consider is, what are your boundaries? Do you have them? If not, why is that? But what boundaries might you need to set up so that you can be present in both places? For me, that was like, I don't take any meetings after 4:00 p.m. and my calendar was blocked off. I don't start my day with meetings for work until 9:30 p.m. I'm sorry, nope, 9:30 a.m. That's after my mom's morning routine. But again, those were clear boundaries that I set that people knew not to overstep. The last thing I'll offer here on this slide is like, what conversations might you need to have with people so that they have your back when things get hard? And what might it look like to be open and honest and vulnerable with your people? Some of you mentioned loneliness, feeling isolated. Some of that changes when you let other people in. And finally, where might you need to say no? And have you said no to things and people? Because again, nothing matters more than your peace and your boundaries. And we don't have to be yes people all the time, caregiver. So I'll offer this. Cultivating your growth requires baby steps. You don't have to overhaul everything today, and you won't, because that creates more stress. But I'll say is commit to yourself. Recognize how you want your loved one to feel. Hold yourself accountable and hold others accountable to the vision that you have for your own well-being and your relationship with your person. That's absolutely important for you to be able to reach the vision that you have for the next 5 years and beyond. But regardless, is that like caring for yourself, caring for your well-being, caring for your person requires intentional effort each and every day. You have to make the choice for things to be different. Things aren't going to change on their own. And so let's just close out hearing from you all. Given what we covered today in your own reflections, what might be your immediate next steps? For some of you, that could be, I need to have some conversations. I need to set some boundaries. I need to check my own mindset. I'm curious, after what we covered in this short amount of time, what might be your next step to reaching your visualized future for yourself and your loved one in the next 5 years? Thank you. Working on yourself. On purpose, focus time to think and dream, engage with outside interests. I need to focus on delegating and work hard on finding respite, giving myself, yes, you matter here. Make a plan, yes. Be intentional about how I'm functioning in this space and making sure I am more present with my mom than efficient. Make a plan, yes. Put me first after God instead of God, family, then self. Find someone I can rely on to help me. Get over the fear no one will show up when I need a break. be okay with my time with outside activities, and not leave early to take care of my mom. Yes. Yes. Okay. I am going to pause here as it's now time for an open Q&A. As more thoughts begin to pop up, I'll leave this up for just a second and turn it over to Andy as we engage in an open Q&A time to ask questions of me or Dr. Toni, of our caregiving journeys, how to support ourselves as caregivers, and anything in between. So I appreciate you all very much for your vulnerability and participating in our workshop today. So Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Jessica, brava to you. That was so inspiring. That was so helpful. You're a wonderful presenter. We're so lucky to have you. I wanted to kick it back to Dr. Toni with a first question. And then we can move on to others. I'm starting to collect in the chat. But Dr. Toni, can you kick it off for us first?
Thanks, Andy, and thanks to all of you. Every time I listen to people who are doing this, I learn something, and I've had many conversations since 2012, believe it or not, on these topics. So one of the things, one of you has been asking some really tough questions about medical noncompliance, anticipatory grief. These are all things that lots of people are reluctant to even contemplate. And it's tough. I mean, I'm listening to Jessica. My daughter's name is Jessica, so every time I hear her talk, it's like, oh my God. But I will tell you, the greatest gift anyone can give you as a caregiver is a playbook for what works for them. But that requires anticipation of outcomes that nobody wants. But the most effective, I'm going to give you a little lecture first, and then I'll ask people to talk. The most effective bereavement care you can receive is that playbook. I don't know if I shared this with the group. I know I've talked to Andy and Jessica about it. When my mother-in-law died, who after a number of years, she had already prepared everything for us. I mean, she bought the tombstone, she bought the plot, she had laid it all out. And so my husband, who was the last of his family, basically, was able to navigate this period with a guide. So because the worst thing that can happen to you as a caregiver is guilt at the end. I didn't do enough. I didn't, you can guilt yourself into the next universe if you want to. But not having that guilt and having other people around you say, we knew what she wanted and you did it, is the best. So I want to hear from the folks who've been talking about medical noncompliance, for example.
That was Gigi, by the way, Dr. Toni.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I was supposed to call people by name or not. But yes, Gigi's comments caught my eyes. So talk to me. I'm Fraser Crane and I'm listening. You guys remember that. Or you can write a little note if you're afraid to.
Gigi, if you want to ask your question, if you're still here, you can do that. You can unmute. If folks want to put their questions in the chat, they can raise their hands virtually or not. We can call on you. Questions can go to either Jessica or Toni or both. I did see a few, there were questions about, like you said, Gigi asked about anticipatory grief. There was a question about ambiguous grief. I think it would be helpful to have some terms for that, definitions of that from our speakers. There was a question from Adrian about suggesting financial resources for respite. Yes.
Okay, so anticipatory grief is just what it sounds like. You know something's coming and you're ruminating on that event in not a positive way. That can that can cause injury to you. I'll just say it that way. Ambiguous loss, Andy, is what you're referencing. Ambiguous loss is what it's defined this way. Alzheimer's is like the worst because the body is there, but the brain is like turning to dust. That is the ambiguity of it all. The things that person used to be and do is what causes the distress for the caregiver. So those are two things. What else did you want me to?
Oh,
Yeah.
I figured out my mute button. I couldn't unmute because we're being recorded. So sorry about that. This is all very amazing. And I actually, Dr. Moss, I was looking on the website at your credentials when you were speaking earlier. So it's really generous of you to share this time. I feel like I have all of the the toolbox, right? Like all of the things, when you say like a playbook, all of the things I should be doing. But there's a sort of somatics physicality to it. So if I'm caretaking my mom and she's incredibly emotionally volatile and scared and just denies diagnoses, and I mean it's very challenging. And my biggest problem is that when I'm in that foxhole, my fear turns to anger. I don't mean anything like explosive, but it's just resentment, it's frustration, it's, and every single time I leave the foxhole, I'm like, why couldn't you do better? But it's very difficult if a doctor says you have to take this medication and, your parent just refuses. That radical acceptance is so difficult. And I haven't found anywhere or anything that I've read or otherwise that helps when I'm in the foxhole. I don't even know if foxhole's like the right word. I think that's
No, that's a great. I like that. I have not heard that. Just you like that formulation.
It's not a war. I should say it's a bomb shelter. I don't feel like I'm fighting her. I feel like
or a tornado shelter.
Exactly. It's a shelter of some kind,
Because I'm from Kansas, I know all about tornadoes. This is where any social workers in this group, just raise your hand. Social workers use a term called single subject design. That is what works best for you. Capitalizes on your strengths to overcome the weaknesses. Anger is definitely on scene. And I think what I've heard and witnessed and read about is that we are in most difficulty when we deny that anger is present. Okay. So you are, GD, you are smart to recognize that it's sitting there. You got sorrow and all other stuff on one shoulder, and I'm pissed at this person for doing what they're doing or being what they're being. Those are two natural present, and it's gonna take a while to, it's like parenting, right? When the kid pisses you off and you want to strangle them, you don't strangle them. You step out, you take a time out and get yourself centered, right? You don't hit you. Now, how many of you are hitters? Some people think that's the way you raise children. It's not. I'm going to tell you, it comes back to bite you when they're at this stage. People who were hit by their parents as children will hit their elderly parents when they become demented. I know a lot of terrible stuff that can be contended with, but you got to recognize it's terrible. Gigi, am I getting where you want to go?
Um, I don't really, the comparison with a problem child to me would be more like if one had a child who was abusing drugs, right? And their actions could result in death.
Yeah,
There's
well,
a
that is
desperation in
right.
medical noncompliance that's not as much. If it was just the emotionality, then I could just, but to know that she's making a decision and it's hers, right?
Right.
Autonomy, I get it. But that's the thing I struggle with, that I can't seem to find a place to perch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard, but I mean, one of the things that gives me, I'm a different person, right? I'm older and I'm a doctor, right? But I do believe we, as we become adults, we have a choice that we can make. Other people may not like those choices. If we don't want to take a medicine, we don't. We don't have to, but we have to live with the consequences of it. But we have choices. And right up at one of the things we learned in geriatrics is that even people with moderately severe dementia can make choices, can be engaged in the conversation about what's happening. So if someone tells you, I don't want to take this medicine, that is their choice. It's different when you're taking care of a child who has equally complex and chronic condition. But with your older adult family members, if they don't want to take that medicine, they shouldn't have to.
It
Gigi, how
really,
does that sound to you?
yeah, that's exactly right.
Thank you,
It really-
Dr. Toni, and thank you, Gigi. Jessica, there was a question in the chat about PTSD and caregivers, and I'm curious, based on your interactions with others over the years, how does this come up? And I'm just curious on your reflections on this. There was a question about stats and research, but I just also want to know about what you've heard in the field, let's say.
So let me see if I understand. What if you're asking me, do people have residual emotional injury after a period of caregiving? And the answer is absolutely yes. Especially if they feel isolated, unsupported. Um, there's a rage that goes with that. That is really, really difficult. First of all, you got to admit that you felt isolated. Then the rage is like fueled by guilt. Well, because I was alone and I didn't have supports, did I really do everything I could have done? I mean, those two travel hand in hand. And so really becoming comfortable, I mean comfortable with the idea that you've done what you could. All right, Lanny's putting, we'll get to you, Lanny, I promise. But that you're comfortable, that you can be comfortable with people making mistakes. I mean, and I pull from child rearing. There's a period of time when children seem to be willfully disobedient, but it's because their frontal lobes haven't developed. People with dementia will have that kind of behavior because their frontal lobe is injured.
Can
So,
I?
yes, go ahead.
This is Debbie. So I'm the one that actually put that out there,
Okay.
and I lead the caregiver chapter at our company.
Right.
And I've experienced, so what I was referring to was more situations that happened. For instance, when my husband was diagnosed with his incurable autoimmune disease, the day he came down, he was never sick. He never took off of work. He was coming home midday. And I'm like, why is he driving down the driveway? I work from home. And I saw his truck coming down the driveway. And when he came in, he was sent home and he looked awful. And within 2 or 3 days, we were at the hospital. He was diagnosed with his disease. And so I've learned how to cope with it better, but it was my realization when I realized PTSD exists for caregivers was years later. He's in remission. He's doing well. He's on his way home from work and it's midday and I see the truck coming down the driveway and I literally met him at the door and I had a panic inside of me. What's wrong? He's like, why does something have to be wrong? And so I had explained to him that I relived that in that moment, that my mind went straight there. And that's when I realized PTSD was actually a real thing for caregivers.
Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that.
Can I just offer a affirmation as a current caregiver of my mom too, of that idea of PTSD while still being a caregiver. And so we've been on this journey for 10 years and there are moments even now where I will hear the sound of a Ring camera. You all know if you have Rings or like other, doorbell devices, and my heart literally skips a beat. And I think like, what's going on? And it's because I vividly remember when my mom would open the door every 5 minutes to wander across the street or to go into the yard. And it is a really salient time as a dementia caregiver when you reach that wandering stage. And now obviously she's not wandering, she's bedbound, but I can tell you the number of experiences throughout the journey or throughout the different chapters that now they don't haunt me, but it just takes seeing something or hearing something or, a moment and you're just like, I remember when. And I can take myself back to the feeling of overwhelm, the feeling of anger, right? Like, and I have to take a second to reground myself, right? To remind, Jessica, you are safe. You are okay. Your mother is no longer wandering, right? Like we are in a different stage now. And so I just want to say thank you for your comment and also just affirm that you can experience post-traumatic stress disorder and still be in the caregiving journey, right? Because at least for me anyway, every chapter has been significantly different as we've been navigating Alzheimer's. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Folks, we need to wrap up soon. And I'm so sorry we don't have more time with all of you. I would love more time with Jessica C. Guthrie and Dr. Toni Miles, who have been wonderful teachers and facilitators for us. So please, let's give a round of applause to both of them. Thank you. And Jessica, I'm so glad as part of your presentation, you mentioned the idea of taking these steps. We're going to do more of that next Wednesday. For our third and final session, Let's Take Action. I think it's going to be an opportunity for some of you to have some accountability for some of what you've dreamt up today. We'll be hosting breakout sessions for you to take those small, sweet steps. And we also will have a panel discussion with, I mentioned before, Richard Louie of MSNBC. He'll be facilitating a conversation with 2 millennial entrepreneurs, very much in the vein of Jessica C. Guthrie. We have Neil Shah of Care Yaya, a very innovative caregiving program, putting together college students with people in need of care, with elders. And we have Jessica Magloria of Guaranteed, who founded this company to support family members who are in hospice and need more navigation. So I hope you'll sign up for that. You will get a follow-up email with some resources, along with a recording of this event. Any final words for us, Dr. Toni and Jessica?
I'll just say one quick thing. Give yourself time, because you don't know. This is like a baseball game. You don't know when it's going to end. It's an inning, take a 7th inning stretch. I mean, I think too many people get fried by the idea, well, it started, it's going to end. Well, but you don't know when. I've talked to caregivers who've done it for 10 years, and I've talked to ones who did it for 30 years. And they can reflect back, but when you're in the moment, I think Jessica's spot on when she says, be in the moment. So there.
My only last words are, you're doing a great job. You're doing the very best you can with the information that you have. And every single day is a chance to get up and try again. And so I hope that in the midst of whatever you are navigating, whomever you're navigating it with, right, you slow down, you see yourself as a human that is doing the very best you can. And just know that you aren't alone in navigating this, even when it feels the loneliest. And so just again, thank you for being here and being present and taking care of your person.
Thank you both. Take good care, caregivers. Hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye, everybody.